There are just 3 words that start with P that help us know when we're stuck in this kind of a space.
What we're here to say is just keep going.
Keep working.
It may feel worse before it gets better, but keep at it.
You can have a perfect computer, even if all the hardware is going well, and it will still run glitchy with some software problems. When depression distorts our thinking, the brain filters out the positive data and magnifies the negative data. So you look at your wedding photos, you don't feel joy. You look at other pictures and you just feel emptiness.
Welcome to Marriage IQ, the podcast helping you become an intelligent spouse.
I'm Heidi Hastings.
And I'm Scott Hastings.
We are 2 doctors, 2 researchers, 2 spouses, 2 lovers, and 2 incredibly different human beings coming together for one purpose: to change the stinky parts of your marriage into scintillating ones, using intelligence mixed with a little fun. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Marriage IQ. We're really glad that you joined us again for this second part of our series on depression and antidepressants. And Scott educated us about the many possibilities for diagnosing depression, medications, how they work, what they work for, what's used for what, and some of the more holistic approaches to dealing with depression. That's Scott's lane, the biology of depression. My lane is the psychology of depression and family relationships, how it affects families, how it affects marriages. So truly, there are many reasons for depression, and we're today not going to talk about those that are caused by inherited genes or hormones even, but more in alignment with things that are situational that are causing depression.
And that really, Heidi, is, I think, the majority of the depression that's experienced is a situation that's occurred. Clinical depression as a result of something that's happened. It most certainly can.
And even if you have that kind of depression towards the end, we're going to talk about how spouses can support their partner through those times and give them the most help. But I think we can all agree that it's easy to spot that your spouse might have depression if you see them crying all the time, or if you see them not being able to get out of bed, or possibly even a lot of weight gain associated with just using food for coping and things like that. But perhaps one of the scariest symptoms of depression isn't crying, but it's looking at the person that you've been married to for 20 or 30 years and feeling absolutely nothing. You might think, I must have fallen out of love. But as a marriage researcher, I'm here to tell you that for most people, that is a lie. Your love isn't gone. Your emotional sensors are just offline.
Wait, so if I don't feel anything for you after 30 years of marriage, it's a lie.
It can be, right? Perhaps it's something else. But when we are not able to feel, even though we can look at pictures of our wedding or our time together and see good times together over the years, that could be very indicative of actual depression. So today, looking at it through that lens, as well as possibly some others, we're going to expose 3 specific lies that depression tells you about your marriage.
Okay. I'm excited to hear.
It's almost as though you have a third presence or being or person within your marriage who is telling you things. And so we want to separate the depression from who you really are at your core as we talk about some of these things. We don't want you to make permanent decisions about your marriage when it's based on a glitch in your brain.
I like that. Yeah.
And so that's why we want to expose some of that here today.
It doesn't feel like a temporary glitch at the time.
It feels very real or very nothing.
And getting back to my experience in the office, acute problems. It's very acute. People are very scared, very nervous. But the tincture of time and some sage advice and when they come back later, no, everything's, wait, what was this? Oh, they've forgotten about it.
Right.
Yeah, there's a little glitch
Right.
in the marriage. Is that worth taking the whole thing out?
Well, when people have extended periods of depression, I think sometimes they are tempted to make decisions that will just try to help them feel something again. Or maybe that's often where they are making decisions about affairs or other kinds of sexual acts that might, get something going to allow them to feel. So what Scott talked about in the first part is like the hardware in a computer, right? You can have a perfect computer, even if all the hardware is going well, and it will still run glitchy with some software problems. So here's the problem. Depression isn't just a mood. In fact, today I want to share with you 3 ways that depression could show up in your marriage and the lies that you might tell yourself when you are depressed.
Okay.
So first, let's talk about the ways that it can show up in your marriage.
Okay.
All right. Think of it as a malicious translator living in your ear.
Oh, I like that.
So the translator takes what you hear and misinterprets it or reinterprets it in a malicious way.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, honey, why don't you rest today? The translator may hear, you're lazy and useless. Your ear interprets that as critical.
I'd say, okay.
Okay, well, maybe you're not feeling depressed right now.
Okay, I see.
Okay, so when your spouse says, I love you, someone who is depressed would hear, they're just saying that because they pity me, or they're saying that because they have to, not because they really mean it. Okay. So the problem may not be that your marriage is bad as much as that the interpreter is misinterpreting or twisting every positive experience or message that you receive from your spouse into something negative or bad.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the first way that it might show up in your marriage.
Okay.
The second way is sometimes it shows up as a memory eraser. It doesn't just make today hard, but it deletes your total ability to remember that you ever were happy. So you look at your wedding photos, you don't feel joy. You look at other pictures and you just feel emptiness. You reinterpret it as, I never felt happy. It rewrites your history to convince you that you've always been miserable in the relationship and therefore you always will be.
That is really depressing.
It is.
I mean, I'm depressed just hearing this.
And it makes me wonder with John Gottman's research where he says he can tell within just a few moments with a couple whether they'll keep the marriage together or get divorced. He can predict divorce if they've rewritten their story to be all negative. And maybe they're depressed. Maybe they have rewritten it that way because they're struggling with depression. Just a thought.
And if you are, then there's help.
There is. So the third way it might show up in your marriage is when depression acts like an emotional firewall, like on that computer. Its job is to block incoming data to protect you, just like a firewall, because your system, your nervous system is overwhelmed. But the problem is it also blocks everything else. It blocks the pain, yes, but it also blocks the joy and the connection and the intimacy. So you really aren't distorting reality, but you've completely cut yourself off from reality by not being able to feel anything.
Okay. So not even a distortion. It's like nothing.
Right. You're living behind almost a glass wall where you can see your spouse, but you can't feel them. In all of these situations, depression kind of distorts reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't just lower your mood, but it changes your vision and it convinces you that you are a burden, that you are a problem, and that your spouse is better off without you, or maybe even that nothing will ever change.
Okay.
So we have a fun little thing that we like to use sometimes when we explain this, and it's that we like to think of our brains as lenses, as glasses that we wear. And sometimes, honestly, sometimes they're rose-colored, where we see the good and the happy. Not everybody's that way, but we can at least sometimes wear those color of glasses. And then sometimes, honestly, the lenses that we see life through are kind of, you and I call them poop colored, right? It's hard to see reality because it's so
It's
dark.
quite descriptive.
Yeah. It's looking at things like poop. We just see the negative.
So you still see the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's colored.
Right. It is
And
colored dark. Or
those with depression, it tends to be colored more darkly.
yeah. And I think a lot of people even describe it more as gray, like they can't even see life in color. Everything just seems colorless.
Okay. Or I should say more poop colored.
Yeah. So depression has a way of swapping out the lenses for our brain without even asking us. And that's where we start having some cognitive distortions.
And we've talked a fair amount about biases and cognitive distortions in the past, emotional triggers, things like that. So
and
I think this is a good reminder about how this can apply
comes together
in someone with depression.
Yes. So the core idea behind cognitive distortions comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which is one of the most effective kinds of therapies we have for depression. And like you said, we actually went deep on that in episode 87, where we broke down the 10 most common distorted thought patterns, and a lot of them actually directly fuel depression.
Okay.
So we tell ourselves stories based upon the way our brain is giving us poop-colored lenses in a way that really makes it difficult to see what reality is, or to see the goodness or the light in our lives. So if this resonates with you, definitely check this episode out where we dive a little bit deeper into it. But here's the basic idea. When depression distorts our thinking, the brain filters out the positive data and magnifies the negative data. It's not that good things aren't happening. The depressed brain just doesn't register them accurately. It's not your fault. It's just the way that your brain is working. And I experienced that in 2015. We had a lot of hard things going on in our family. And
those were rough years.
They were very
15
rough.
and 16.
And I thought it was the worst year ever. But when I looked back at pictures at the end of the year, I realized, oh, there were so many good things that happened this year. Why didn't my brain tap into any of those? Why can it only see the negative? Perhaps I had depression of some sort. It was a pretty rough year.
That's probably one of the reasons why you radically changed your diet that next year.
Which totally changed everything as far as the depression. Yeah. I got rid of sugar and flour in my diet. And
she has not had sugar in almost 10 years.
So you can see this really clearly in relationships where we can only see the negative things about our spouse. So it's not indicative of there being a character flaw. It's a distorted filter. And we have to really look at, as a spouse, what we're saying in response to that, right? If we just say, just start seeing things through positive light, just start putting on those
think
glasses
more positively, honey.
Yeah. Why can't you stop chewing on your cud and start turning it around?
Wait, people don't chew on cud. Only cows do.
That usually backfires. Instead, if we can look at it through examining our filters that we're viewing life through, it gently interrupts the loop by asking one simple question. Is this the only possible explanation?
Okay. Is there any other explanation?
That we can look through this. And when I use this with clients a lot, we'll just say, let's look and see if there's another way to look at it that's a little more true. And by finding that truth about the thoughts that they're having, by looking for a way that doesn't expose those distorted thought patterns, immediately depression or anxiety or distress can be alleviated just by finding different lenses to look at it through. So
it's so hard, though, to change those neural tracks.
It takes sitting intentionally, looking at our thoughts.
When after a rainstorm, you have those flash floods,
and
it creates these little canyon, so to speak. And it's hard to divert that
To
water.
make the water go back the other way.
But that's really what we have to start doing, is tending to that and diverting that. It's not easy.
It's a really great analogy. And I think if we just can tell ourselves it's possible.
It's definitely possible.
Look at things, and a lot of times it'll take having the help of somebody who knows how to do this a little bit better. But once we start loosening up on some of those distortions, instead of just telling ourselves worst case scenario, something really important starts to happen. We start to feel like our life is meaningful again. And when we make efforts, it seems like it's rational instead of pointless. And we may have, when we were depressed, had a sense of helplessness that begins to lessen and weaken a little bit when we start taking more control of our lives.
So I'm just curious. I think if somebody's just starting this, they're recognizing, hey, I have these ditches here over years and years of water running through them, and I'm trying to reroute this ditch.
Yeah.
Can it be, when they first start trying to reroute, does it maybe seem at first
to get worse
before it gets better?
Yeah, it definitely can.
I think that's probably important for people to really hear and understand, is it might seem worse before it starts getting better.
Or the other thing I see quite often is they're able to make some cognitive changes in the way they see things when they ask themselves, is there another way to see this? What might be more true? And when I teach them to tap into, I'm human and I make mistakes and I'm growing, but I'm not responsible for this full blank, whatever it is. They are really hard on themselves that they can't keep doing it, right?
Well, they might
do it
be
a time or two, but
tempted to say, I'm out.
Yeah.
This is too hard. It's getting worse. It's not getting better. I'm out. And I think what we're here to say is just keep going.
Keep working.
It may feel worse before it gets better, but keep at it.
Yeah. I think all of this connects really well with the work of psychologist Martin Seligman, who I've followed some of his stuff for several years now, but this is an area that I haven't tapped into of his research until just preparing for this podcast. That is the idea of depression being linked with learned helplessness. So he did a study with dogs that he was trying to figure out how we can get out of depression, how we can get out of negative mindsets. And studies with research weren't so careful with animals and things back then in the 60s. He's really sorry about that, but they would put 3 different groups of dogs, a control group, a group that had both, and then a group that received painful shocks. And then they would open the door to let them go. Every time they'd try to get out, this would happen. And those that received the constant shocks eventually just laid down and did nothing. And it's what he called learned helplessness, because there's no use even trying because I'm not going to get out. He uses that to explain how in depression, sometimes when we've tried things and we don't have a change in outcomes, we just become very hopeless. And we tell ourselves some messages about it that actually stop our progression and healing. So it's really easy to remember. There are just 3 words that start with P that help us know when we're stuck in this kind of a space. And when that depression takes hold, we tend to interpret things first as personal. That's the first P. This is my fault. Everything's my fault. Take full responsibility for anything that ever goes wrong. The second is it's pervasive. So we're telling ourselves the message, this affects everything in my life. This will...
Catastrophic thing.
Yep.
That's cognitive biases.
Yep. And then the third is this is permanent. The third P. This will never change. So if you are experiencing some of those stories that you're telling yourselves or messages or thoughts, those are patterns that show up, whether you're the one struggling or loving someone who's struggling. And I love that Dr. Seligman didn't leave us sitting right there. Instead, he says, if helplessness can be learned, it can also be unlearned. not through force, not through shame, not through fake positivity, but through clarity and empathy and compassion and practice, practice, practice.
This reminds me of that movie Soul.
Okay.
By Disney.
Yeah.
42. You have to watch it because otherwise you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. But you know what I'm talking about?
Of course.
She just felt completely hopeless. Like there's nothing left. When you brought that up, it just made me think of the dude. What was his name? Joe Gardner. Spends time with her, helping her just with compassion, with practice, until finally she starts seeing her own self-worth. I love that movie. That's easily on my top 10 list.
Yeah. And what Joe was practicing and demonstrating there for us is really helpful for spouses in working with their spouse who's struggling with depression.
Yeah.
Not telling them, just get over it, just change yourself. But compassion and empathy go a long way to making changes. Sometimes it starts with simply realizing these glasses, they're not showing me the full picture. So I want to break down those 3 Ps and show you the lies that we tell ourselves, the 3 lies that we tell ourselves, because the 3 lies that people who are depressed tend to tell themselves in those 3 areas. So first is personalization. The depressed brain says, this is because of me, I'm the problem. And it comes from the first major lie depression tells, that you would be better off without me. That's such a powerful distortion because it doesn't just say I'm having a hard time or I've made mistakes. It says I am the hard time. I am the mistake. I am the bad one here. You don't feel like somebody who is struggling. You feel like a burden. And in marriage, this has a huge impact. When you believe that lie, you may start to withdraw emotionally. So for those of you who may be pulling away from your spouse or shutting down or even pushing your spouse away, keep in mind that it may not be because you don't care or because you do care, but because you're telling yourself, I'm protecting them from my misery. That to some seems noble and it feels selfless, but what it actually does is it slowly erodes the relationship and the connection. So that lie isn't the truth. That's the depression talking. So let's name the truth clearly. This isn't all on you. It isn't all your fault. Depression is part of the equation, and relationships are systems, not solo performances. The truth then is, as a couple, you can work together to understand what's happening and look for solutions. Connection, not isolation, is what actually brings relief. And I want to state that again because it's so important. Isolation makes depression grow. Connection is what actually brings relief. And the moment you stop believing I am the problem, you can actually create a space for healing to begin. The second pattern is pervasiveness, like I said, the belief that everything is bad. And this is the kind of thinking that says, if I burn dinner, my whole life is a failure. I don't do anything right. One moment bleeds into everything else. From this distortion comes the second lie depression tells us in marriage, and that is that we don't love each other anymore, like I talked about in the beginning. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Depression often includes the reduced ability to feel pleasure or joy, and your brain's reward system, especially dopamine, which we talked about in your episode, is essentially muted. Because you can't feel joy right now, your brain jumps to a conclusion. So in marriage, this shows up in a really painful way. You look at your spouse, and instead of warmth or connection or spark or excitement, you feel nothing. And the depression rushes in with the explanation, if you don't feel love, then the marriage must be dead. The relationship isn't broken. The signal just isn't getting through. So here's how I usually explain this to couples. This is the lie of pervasiveness. Because you don't enjoy food or hobbies or sunshine right now, your brain tells you that you also don't enjoy your husband or your wife. And you assume that the spark is gone, but it's not that the relationship's broken. It's the receiver.
Good to know.
So let's ground this lie in truth.
Okay.
This period where you're feeling depressed, where you're not getting the appropriate hormones for your brain to work, just one part of your life. Not everything is broken and not everything is empty. Even if joy feels unavailable right now, there are still areas where growth and meaning and connection can exist. Like you said, maybe that's where puppies and kitties and babies come in, where you can turn for joy, grandchildren. So just remember that this is not your whole life. This is just a part of your life. This is just for this season. And then finally, the third in many ways, and perhaps the most dangerous distortion, is permanence. And this is the thought that says, this will never get better. Why even try? Psychologists sometimes call this time distortion, where depression stills your ability to even imagine the future. Mm-hmm. It convinces you that how you feel today will be how you'll feel forever.
That happens a lot.
Yeah?
Yeah. That happens, I think, to everyone. It happens to me too. Because, and again, in the moment, it feels pretty rough.
Yeah. We have the inability to see what's coming. And in a marriage, it's what sometimes we call a hope killer. It can stop you from doing the things that might help, like going to counseling, planning a date night, having a conversation, getting the help you need, because your brain whispers, what's the point? We'll just be miserable anyway.
The dog that just doesn't get up.
Yes, exactly.
That is so sad.
Over and over, you come to the point that,
like, why?
Hopeless. I actually see this a lot. Why try? Nothing's ever going to change. It's been the same result every time. But I do want you to know, listeners, that I have also seen it change when both people can put some effort in, get the resources they need. I have seen things change.
And a lot of times it just starts with one person.
Yep. And if one of you is depressed and the other isn't, it may not be the depressed person that's able to start making that change. It stops you too from fighting for your marriage because it convinces you that the war is already lost. I just have to stay in this marriage until one of us dies. A lot of times I see this because
that is depressing. Honey.
Yeah.
I'm depressed just listening.
One of the spouses doesn't have the economic or educational ability to make a change for themselves, like to actually leave the relationship. So they're just like, I'm just going to sit here and
just rot,
shrivel up.
Yeah.
Or go totally my own separate way, which we call roommate syndrome. The truth is, feelings are kind of like weather. The storms pass. And I think about that when I do mindful walks outside, especially on really gray days where it's heavy and I struggle with some seasonal affective disorder. It's hard to remember that that's not my reality. That's not my permanence.
Yeah.
But as I see the wind blowing the clouds, it is kind of a reminder that, look, in a couple of days, we'll have some sunshine and things will feel a little better. And if your depression is not seasonal affective disorder and it's socked in for a year or maybe more, there's still the ability for things to change when you get help. But just don't get hopeless to the point of not being willing to get the help. Giving up hope does the most damage. And that brings me to the idea of something I really love and you really love, I think. And that's redemption stories.
I love redemptions.
We all love those stories where something broken or hard or neglected becomes something really beautiful. I'm an HGTV fan, or other versions of that where they take old rundown houses and fix them up. The house wasn't worthless. It was just neglected or damaged or weathered.
Yeah.
And depression recovery is kind of similar to this. It's not about replacing the whole person. It's about repairing the systems and rebuilding what's been worn down. What kind of redemption stories do you like? And this is a psychological redemption, right? That we're talking
about. Well, look,
about.
I like them too. I like to see the end results. Like, oh, that's so cute what they did with that.
Yeah. I think on YouTube, a lot of the most popular videos are telling a story of how people have overcome great odds. Seligman's research kind of highlights this psychological redemption. He reminds us that you didn't choose the conditions that taught you helplessness or led you to helplessness within the depression. You didn't deserve depression. But here's the hopeful part. You can participate in rewriting your story. Even small actions, small shifts in thought can start to loosen some of those distortions. And over time, you can reclaim hope, connection with your spouse, and even joy. So for those spouses who are wondering, what's a checklist? What's something I can do to help my spouse, to help my partner? It's important for you to know that, like I said, depression doesn't always look like crying. Sometimes the signs are much quieter or even outwardly irritating.
Yep.
You might notice that they've totally
Might
numbed.
be irritable. Yeah.
Or there are a few people who are huge overachievers to mask their depression. Maybe your partner seems distant or snaps at little things or has zero tolerance for any kind of stress in their life. It's not them being mean. It's that their emotional tank is running on empty.
I want to validate the husbands listening right now. If your wife snaps at you, it might not be about you at all. It's the depression that's exhausting her bandwidth. Think of it like a check engine light on your car. It doesn't mean the car hates you. It means that the system is under stress and it needs attention.
That's a good analogy. I really like that. That's great. So this is a big one. Depression tells you the biggest lie, which is wait till you feel better to start doing something about it. But here's the truth. You will never feel like it. The secret is behavior comes before the motivation. You don't wait for the feeling to pick up the phone and call a therapist. You don't wait for the feeling to get out of bed and start moving. You don't wait to feel like it to call up a friend and say, can we go to lunch or can we talk for a minute? You create the feeling by taking action. Some things that you can do to take action are just go for a walk or hug your spouse, make the bed, call a friend, just do the thing and the feeling will follow. You can't just wait for the inspiration, or depression will keep you stuck if you do.
That's true.
It's like planting seeds in the winter. You don't wait until the flowers bloom to water them. You water them so they can bloom.
I like that.
Yeah. I think we talk about the same with sex too. You make the decision to act. Yep. This is what I'm going to do with my husband. And then the desire follows. So to sum it all up, dear, biology gives you energy. If you take care of depression biologically first, perhaps with things that Scott talked about, like medications, like getting better sleep and exercise and healthy eating, that gives you some energy. Psychology gives you the roadmap to understand the intricacies of depression and some things that you can do to lessen it and to maybe even overcome or heal it. Depression really is complicated, and there's brain chemistry and hormones and life stress and learned patterns of helplessness. But we do have tools like CBT and behavioral activation and awareness of those cognitive distortions that help you reclaim control.
If you haven't watched or listened to the episode where we talked about depression and antidepressants and how it works in your system, go back and check it out. And I think that'll really go well with this one. Sometimes people are just trying to therapy their way out of a thyroid problem or other biological factors. And it's important to get those things checked out as well. It's worth knowing that full picture.
Yeah, that is true. And remember, depression isn't a moral failing. It's a system that's under stress for your partner, for you, for yourself. But with small steps and understanding, you can start rewriting that story. And we encourage those who are really stuck in depression that makes life so hopeless, where they want to take their life, where they are having suicidal thoughts, please get help. Often, many county mental health offices will do a free evaluation. You can call them and have them come to your home to do an evaluation to see if you need further help with that, or they'll have different resources. So look those up, especially if you're in a bigger city, but reach out to someone, let them know.
Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you ringing in the new year 2026 with us, talking about depression. And we hope you don't get depressed by all of this, but we both really feel like this is going to be helpful for people who need this push. If you feel like you need to, reach out to us, hello@marriageiq.com, and we will respond.
And share it with a friend or a family member that you think might find some help in it.
Yeah. And we really look forward to seeing you next time on another exciting episode of
Marriage IQ.